I am so excited to be here today to not only show you some of my favorite new features across desktop and mobile, but also some of the performance enhancements along the way. So let's get to it. Speaking of performance, I'm going to start here in Photoshop, and this may seem like a little thing, but if you've ever created a new document in Photoshop and you wonder why that new document dialog box takes 3, 4, 5 seconds to come up, you'll be happy to know that it's now instantaneous. A little thing, but it goes a long way every single day. Next up, let's talk about free transform. Last year I introduced not having to hold down the shift key. We got your feedback. And now you want that experience to not only be consistent across pixel and vector layers, but you want to be able to toggle it based on your preference. And that preference is now sticky. So whatever you choose, that's the way it's going to be. So let's go into warp, one of my favorite new capabilities. Now I switched to warp. I didn't get the standard 3x3 grid because I can go from 3x3 all the way up to 5x5, and if that's not enough, I can click to add my own custom points wherever I need them along the way, and I get the ability to hold down the shift key and select multiple points at the same time so that I can transform this flower to make it a little wider and a little taller, just like that. Next up, let's take a look at making selections. In the past, I might have used Adobe Sensei's powered select subject, which in this case, it would think all of the food is the subject. But what if I only want one thing? Now with the new Object Select tool, even in the shape of a rectangle, I can just go ahead and make a selection, and Adobe Sensei figures out what I was trying to select and does it for me. Even if I come down to a pepper and do that, it figures out that I wanted the pepper and makes that selection for me. Now, wait, what if it's more intricate? The tool can be switched from a rectangle to a lasso, so that even if I go around one of the zucchini, and I'm using a mouse to do this, so this won't be pretty, I go around it, and Adobe Sensei figures out that I only wanted the one and does it for me. Selections will never be the same going forward. But wait, why do we make selections in the first place? We typically make selections so that we can take the object off the background or remove the background. Well, what if Adobe Sensei could do that all in one step for you? What if it could figure out what the subject is and remove it from the background in one click with one new button here in the Properties panel called Remove Background, just like that. Now, I know what you're thinking. That was too quick. I've got to see that again on a different image. Click. Yep, it does it on that one too. And this truly is how Skynet got started. All right, switching gears. Now, this beautiful image created by artist Isabella May, she creates these images from scratch with literally hundreds, if not thousands of layers. And this is a 5 GB file, so we're going to talk about performance, but more importantly, when you get a file like this, especially from an artist, typically the layers may not be named as best they could. So in this case, I've got a lot of background copies here, but that's okay. I need to know what's on the layer, so now with the new zoom to layer capability, I can hold down my Option key and just click, and it will zoom to that layer and show me what's on it. I can isolate it and then name that layer, and let's do that one more time. Zoom to layer, isolate the layer, see what's on it, and know exactly what's on my layers going forward with extreme performance now in Photoshop. Now I'm going to switch gears. We're going to switch over to Illustrator. Illustrator's all about vectors, and of course in this version, it's all about performance as well. I've got literally thousands of vectors selected here. But wait, let's zoom out because that's going to take a minute, right? Nope, instantaneous zooming with thousands of vectors in Illustrator. GPU performance is amazing. I love it. Now, what about drawing those paths? Now again, I mentioned that I don't have my Wacom stylus here, I'm just using a mouse, so this is not going to be great. I'll do the best I can. Too many points. Well, with a new improved simplified path, I can go to Path, Simplify, and it figures out, hey, we don't need that many points for that path. Let's take it from 28 down to 4 without changing the shape, just like that. So you'll love those improvements on simplified paths in Illustrator. Now, switching gears to InDesign. InDesign gets a speed boost. It now launches 25% faster than the previous version. But the problem we're going to solve today is the client doesn't like that image. I'm trying not to take it personally because I took this image in Malmo, Sweden of the turning torso. But they want a different tower. I don't have a different tower. So now in InDesign, I can right-click, find similar images. It will source Adobe stock, go out and look for images like this, show me tower images. I see the one I want. I just drag it over. I can replace that one with this one. And if it's too big, I can select it and use the new or improved content-aware fit to fit it down. Now, if they do like that one, I can even license this image right on the canvas without having to go back to the library and figure out where I got it from. All right, now speaking of images. Thank you. Speaking of images, as a photographer, I love Lightroom. I use Lightroom every single day. And I've got Lightroom here running on an Android device. And what's new in Lightroom that I love now, both on mobile and desktop, are new interactive tutorials. And you might think, oh, tutorials, it's another video. No. If I tap on this tutorial by Randy and start the tutorial, the first thing it does is it downloads the image into my device so I can continue working. It then walks me through, step by step, the steps that Randy took to get this. And that little guide is showing me what sliders to move. If I move the slider and I go a different way, it's okay. I can experiment with what that slider does to see what clarity does, but then I can go ahead and lock it in on the one I'm supposed to. Then I go to the next tab. For lighting, I can see what exposure does, and then still come back to where I'm supposed to in this tutorial. And I can keep going through and see shadows, see what shadow detail will do, until I'm on the spot that I'm supposed to be on. Now, that's step-by-step interactive tutorials. But wait, there's more. Let's go back. Close this. Scroll up to the discovery area. Because in the discovery area, it's not so much about learning step-by-step. It's about seeing cool images and techniques, tapping on one, and instead of you walking through step-by-step, you can just scroll through the edits to see what they were. And if you like the look of this final image, you can go in and download that as a preset to apply to your images going forward, all in Lightroom on mobile and desktop. I've got one more thing. Let's head back to Photoshop. Speaking of capturing the look of things, I love the colors in this image. If I wanted to create a color theme in the past, I might have pulled out my phone, used Adobe Capture, and pointed maybe at the screen or at the scene to capture those color themes. Well, today, we no longer have to worry about that because we're bringing the capture experience to the desktop for the first time. So I can go in to my libraries, click the plus sign, and there's a new option, Create from Image, and it brings up the Adobe Capture experience right in Photoshop. So I can capture patterns for the first time seamlessly, vector shapes, color themes, which is what I want. So I can drag the color stops around to get the exact color themes that I want. Once I do that, I can save it to my library, and for the first time, both on mobile and desktop, seamless gradients from your image or from a source file. Here we go. If I need more stops, no problem. I can drag the slider, get more stops, and get the exact color themes that I'm looking for seamlessly, all in Adobe Capture on the desktop for the first time. And those are just a few of my favorite things on the desktop and mobile, as well as performance enhancements. Back to you, Scott. Thank you.
Good morning. What an unreal honor to be here launching the very first version of Photoshop right here on the iPad. Let's jump right into a quick overview. So the first thing you'll notice is the experience is intuitive. On the left, I have my core Photoshop compositing tools. On the right, I have easy access to my layers, all those things I want to do with them, and my properties panel with different options depending on my layer type. So it's intuitive, it's so easy to just get started, and we've really focused on optimizing the experience for the iPad with new features like this focused layers view, which lets me keep my eyes on the canvas as I'm jumping in and out of groups and going about my work, and optimizations specifically for the touch environment. So always interacting with gestures wherever possible, like here in the header where I can just scrub to zoom in and out. We've even added a brand new touch shortcut. You can see it here, fully draggable around the screen. This gives me quick access to secondary actions depending on where I tap in the app when I hold it down with my thumb. So here in the Layers panel, for example, I can just tap to multi-select. And depending on what tool I'm in, like here in Move, where I can just swipe to duplicate. Really gives me these touch acceleration points that make working on the iPad quick and easy. So it's intuitive, it's optimized, but we know none of that matters if performance isn't fast, because when you're working in Photoshop, sometimes you can have hundreds, thousands of layers in the blink of an eye, huge files, and this is just one such PSD. I began it on the desktop. It's over 1 gigabyte. It's got more than 500 layers, but performance stays smooth as I scroll through them all, and even as I zoom down into that very last pixel and bounce all the way back out. So, thank you. It's intuitive, it's optimized, it's fast, and most importantly, it's just a ton of fun to play with. So let's get started making something. And where better to begin than by making something totally new all right here on the iPad. So as I jump into creating a new document, you'll see that familiar screen, all those presets you know from the desktop. In this case, I have a custom one ready to go. Really easy to just get started. And I'll bring in a few images from my background from those same libraries Scott and Terry have been talking about. It's where I keep all my inspiration, my assets, like this moss, which is that texture I love. But you can see, that bright sky is not exactly the look I'm going for here. And just like on desktop, I have those tools I need to start my selection, like lasso. And you'll see here as I complete my selection, on the iPad, we've really optimized that experience for the touch environment with that bottom bar. Surfaces those things I want to do next, like mask. And here in the Layers panel, you'll see when it's added, I'm dropped right into it so I can just start brushing to smooth out those edges and get a really nice blend going between my layers here. Let's bring all this together a little bit more using Gaussian blur. Now, this is one of the most popular filters in Photoshop, really powerful for creating this depth of field effect. And we'll just unify the composition through color using global adjustment layers. Really powerful. These work just like they do in desktop. You can see as I tweak the color here, I can get just that tone I want, and I can go back and edit this at any time here on the desktop today or next year. Great. So my background is ready. Now let's add a magical element, really make this composition pop. And back here in my libraries, I have this mushroom I've been wanting to use. You can see as I start this selection with my quick select tool, it's the style I love, kind of a video game toadstool, but it's going to need a little work to really pop in this composition. And as I extend that selection using the lasso, something I really love about using the iPad and the Apple Pencil is that this actually feels really natural, even on stage in front of 20,000 people. It's just like tracing. Actually breathes new life into this tool, which cannot always be the most fun to use with a mouse. There we go. Again, I'm right in that mask, so I can just soften it using Gaussian blur, and then clean up those edges, taking full advantage of all that pressure sensitivity of the Apple Pencil. Really natural, gets that mushroom right where I want it. OK, so now let's add that pop of magic I was talking about, right? And here in the Layers Properties panel, we've made it really easy to add clipped adjustment layers. Now, this is something people want to do all the time, even if they don't know about clipping, and that's change a property of just one layer. So as I add HueSat here, you can see, I'll bring up the saturation. Only that mushroom is starting to glow. And again, that mask is added for me, so I can just start brushing to bring down where I've blown it out in the cap. That is the precision I expect from Photoshop. Cool. So I've got this lighting effect coming together. Let's really heighten that by playing with blend modes. And here I've got those blend modes I want, like overlay, which is my favorite for this type of work with glowing light. It's really easy to just grab a color, brighten it up a little bit, and as I start brushing here, again, full pressure sensitivity of the Apple Pencil, you can see immediately that mushroom is starting to glow. Really looks like the cap's illuminated. And then I can just go back in, add a little highlight anywhere I think it hits the rest of the image. And now that I'm thinking about that play between the glowing mushroom and the moss below, let's bring that even further with one more clipped layer. I can bring down that exposure and then just start painting on that mask to show a little light from that original layer beneath. Such a subtle effect. Really feels like I'm painting with light here. Cool. So I've blended my elements together. I've created this dramatic play between light and dark. Now, let's just top it off with a little fun. Back here in my libraries, I have some sparkle in the form of these fireflies. This is another great place to use my blend modes, like screen. Makes it really easy to just bring only the light into the image. Saves me so much time, and then I can just create one more level of depth using Gaussian blur. There we go. In just a few minutes, I've gone from a totally blank canvas to this magical, completely non-destructively created composition, all in Photoshop and all right here on the iPad. Thank you. Now, everything we've seen so far is available on the iPad today. But there's one more thing I want to show you, and that's a quick sneak at just a few of the ways we're bringing our most powerful Sensei technologies from Photoshop on the desktop right here to the iPad very, very soon. Now, this is still under development, but keep your apps updated because it's coming very soon. And to start this one, I'll just jump into this cloud document I have, kind of an underwater composition I've got going, bridging these two worlds. I'll just make a quick edit, bringing in one more turtle. Never have too many turtles here. And of course, the next thing I want to do, sort of integrate this more tightly into the composition, start a selection, mask it out. And as we've seen already on the iPad today, I have options. I could use Quick Select. I could use my lasso tool, if I really wanted that fine-grained control. But it's a little time-consuming, kind of error-prone if I am on the bus, as Scott said. Of course, there's an easier way. If I were on the desktop, I would just use Select Subject. And we're bringing that full Sensei power of Select Subject right here to the iPad. All I have to do is tap this button, and there we go. I have to pause because if you blinked, you missed it, like in Terry's demo. In the tap of a button, Sensei has analyzed my layer, identified my subject, and started my selection for me. It saved me so much time in tracing. Really feels like magic here on the iPad. So that's Select Subject coming soon here to the iPad. And for this next sneak, I'll bring in an intrepid explorer to bridge these two worlds. This guy's up to the task. Of course, now that I have Select Subject, I'll use that to start. And it gets me 99% of the way there. But, never hurts to have a human touch. And of course, this type of hair is always tricky to select. If I were on the desktop, I would just use the Refine Edge brush. And again, we're bringing that full Sensei power of Refine Edge right here to the iPad. So let me give you a quick sneak. Just like on the desktop, all I have to do is start brushing to tell Sensei where I've got a complicated edge and I want it to focus its magic. And there we go. I sit back. It does all the heavy lifting. If you take a look at that mask mode, you can see every curl, every hair, perfectly selected. All I have to do is add any refinements I want, like decontaminate, and tap Done. There's our little guy, all his beautiful curls, perfectly masked, all right here on the iPad. Again, thank you. I have to pause for a minute because this is so seamless that the full power can easily get lost, but it is impossible to make this type of complicated selection this quickly and this precisely without Refine Edge and all that Sensei power. It's just one more example of how we're bringing that power and precision you expect from Photoshop right here to the iPad. So to finish this composition, I'll just turn back on a few effects to focus the eye, and there we go. Select Subject, Refine Edge. These are just two of the amazing Sensei technologies we're bringing from Photoshop on the desktop here to the iPad very, very soon. And like everything else you've seen today, this is just the beginning. So if you already use Photoshop, Download the app, load in a few projects, just start working. And if you're new to Photoshop, or maybe you've been overwhelmed by the desktop in the past, give us a try on iPad, because this is just the place to start. Thank you so much. Back to you, Scott.